Welcome to another episode of This Happened Here. On this channel, we travel around the US and to any other country to bring you true and amazing stories. Here, I go into the minds of my characters and try to tell their stories from their point of view, but not today. I will be telling it just as it is. Now, if you like these stories and what I do here, please let me know by subscribing to this channel. I would so appreciate that. Today, I will take you on a 2-hour walk where we cover over 2 miles underground inside the largest cave in the world, known as Mammoth Cave. You will have it easier, of course, because this video will not be 2 hours long. But I was huffing and puffing and at times getting close to tears as we basically ran the 2 miles, crossing over the bottomless pit, sashaying through Fat Man's misery, and then climbing back to the surface up 155 metal stairs. Honestly, I don't know which one of us is more fortunate. You sitting in your comfy chair watching this, or me actually being there and experiencing all of this. But on this side of the fence, I am so jealous of you. Now, you would never look at me and think athletic. Actually, you would think quite the opposite. So this 2-mile hike and moving so fast was quite a stretch for me, but the tour guide ranger did give us multiple warnings. So the fault is not mine, it's CB's. I think I'm healthy enough, but my job requires me to sit on my hiney every day for hours. So half running 2 miles in 50-something degree weather was almost torture. But would I do it again? The answer is yes. I love to explore and to see all these amazing and different things, and I love to share them with you as well. I might have pouted and fumed, but I found the whole experience very interesting, and I hope you'll find it so as well. There are countless stories about Mammoth Cave and the Mammoth Cave National Park, and I wish I could share them all with you. But I will only share 4 stories in this episode as I take you with me on our walk through the cave. Now, not all these stories have a happy ending, so please be advised. The first story is about a man by the name of Randy Roscoe. He was a visitor to the Mammoth Cave National Park. The second story will be about William Floyd Collins, a cave explorer back in 1887. This third story will be about a visitor who got lost inside the cave. And my last and most precious story is about a man who was the most instrumental in carving out the trail through the Mammoth Cave, the path we walked today. These stories were the most interesting to me, and I think you'll find them so as well. Now on to these stories. I am your host, LT Bartek. As mentioned before, the Mammoth Cave National Park is the world's largest cave system. In that 2-mile walk, we had only covered half of 0.1% of these caves. There is evidence of the Native Americans who had explored this cave for 5,000 years and had traveled and utilized the resources of the area surrounding the caves for more than 12,000 years. Mammoth Cave National Park rests on the ancestral lands of the Cherokee, Shawnee, and Chickasaw tribe. Mammoth Cave is a maze with 412 miles of explored underground passageway stacked on each other in 5 different levels. No one knows how far and how deep it goes. It is estimated that over 600 miles of passages are still unexplored.
Water in certain areas, so use the handrails, watch your step. We're going to bypass 3 features in this order. The first is side saddle pit. It's a pit to the right of the path. It's about 45 feet deep. Shortly after that, you'll find yourself on a metal bridge. At that point, you are standing over the bottomless pits. When you get to the metal bridge, the best view is just looking straight down. There are holes that are meant to be there in the bridge. You can see all the way down, 115 feet down. After that, about 3 minutes, and you will find yourself in Fat Man's Misery.
It is not concrete what caused the Native Americans to leave the area, but the cave was rediscovered by a young lad in 1790. His name was John Hoochian. Legend has it that he was hunting one day for wildlife when he spotted a black bear. He fired his arrow but only wounded the animal. The bear fled inside the cave and John pursued, thus rediscovering by accident what we now know as the Mammoth Cave. Now, on to the rest of the stories. Up first is Randy Roscoe. In May of 2015, 44-year-old Randy Roscoe cleared out his apartment in Bowling Green, Kentucky. He resigned from his job and forwarded his mail to a P.O. box in Bowling Green. He was a very private person, so he had not told nary a soul about what he was doing or thinking. It was only when the family, his sister in particular, had not heard from him for weeks that they realized that something was wrong. So they searched for him, but were not able to find him. So the family then filed a missing persons report. But then, on June 15 of the same year, they found him living in Washington. His reason for his disappearance was that he just needed some privacy, and packing up and moving away was the only way to get that. So in November of the same year, when they had not seen or heard from him for a few weeks again, no one panicked. But that was a mistake. Roscoe drove to the Mammoth Cave National Park and parked in the visitors' parking lot. On Thursday, November 19th, 2015, at 2:30 p.m., after rangers saw that the vehicle had not moved in 2 weeks, they began a search for the driver of the vehicle. On November 19, rangers and volunteers conducted an initial search around the vicinity surrounding the park's headquarters. Roscoe was not found there. On November 20, they extended their search to a quarter-mile radius around the visitors' parking lot. Still unable to find Roscoe, volunteers from Hart County Rescue Squad and Butler County Rescue Squad came on board to find Roscoe. They even brought on rescue dogs to help with the search. So they searched along sections of the Green River, but to no avail. On Sunday, November 22nd of 2015, Park staff and Edmonson County volunteers patrolled the Floating Mill Hollow, the area between Green River Road and the hotel. They searched from the Flint Ridge Road picnic area and then made their way back to Green River, but Roscoe was still not found. To this day, Roscoe is still a missing person. It is unsure what happened to Roscoe, but if anyone knows Randy Roscoe and his whereabouts, don't hesitate to contact the Park Watch phone line at 888-219-1599 to leave a recorded message. William Floyd Collins was born on July 20th, 1887. He was trapped inside Sand Cave on January 30th, 1925, and was laid to rest on April 26, 1925. Floyd Collins was an avid Kentucky cave explorer. He loved exploring the caves on his family's property, which was hundreds of miles long. He had been doing so since he was 6 years old. In fact, he was the one who had actually discovered the crystal cave beneath his father's farmland back in 1917. There were many caves around his home in Kentucky, and every owner was trying to beat out the competition in tourism sales of cave exploration. This was at the time so prevalent that it was known as the Cave Wars. Floyd was also one such person. He had opened up Crystal Cave and was offering tours, but on most days he would make little to no profit. Their property was too remote, and they were at the end of the line of Flint River Road, so tourists would be enticed by the closer caves along the road and would not bother to venture as far as where his cave was located. Frustrated by this, Floyd devised a plan. He knew of another cave closer to Cave City Road. A fellow by the name of Beasley Doyle owned this property. So Floyd approached him with a business proposition. He would do the tours and would split the profit with Doyle. This cave was known as Sand Cave. Beasley Doyle agreed, and on Friday, January 30th, 1925, 38-year-old Floyd entered Sand Cave to explore. He had a single kerosene lantern to light his way, but this was the norm back then. As soon as Floyd entered Sand Cave, he realized how challenging it was. He found himself squeezing through tight spaces, crawling on his stomach between rocks and the cave floor, with one hand pushing the lantern ahead and the other stuck at his side. But then his lantern started to flicker, and he knew, being unfamiliar with this cave, that if his light went out, he would be in big trouble. So he turned and started heading towards the entrance of the cave. He needed to get out as quickly as possible and was moving fast, trying to get out before his light went out totally. It was really flickering now as he moved, so unable to see where he was placing his foot, he accidentally dislodged a 27-pound rock. The rock fell on his ankle, wedging it firmly between the surrounding rocks. He tried without success to free himself, but he found he could not move the rock. He was trapped in a stone straitjacket. On Saturday, when Floyd's neighbors noticed that he had not come home, they went in search of him. They remembered him telling them about Sand Cave, and when they went there, they found his coat hanging on a tree outside the cave. A 17-year-old boy named Jewel Estes was sent in to look for him because he was the only one slim enough to squeeze through the tight passageway of the cave. So he crawled in and soon found Floyd, but he was unable to free him. So he crawled back out of the cave and went to inform Floyd's family about Floyd's predicament. They brought him food and water and tried to get him out, but they couldn't either. It was now Sunday and Floyd was still stuck. His family was getting desperate. His brother Marshall had even offered a $500 reward to whoever could free Floyd. But this only brought disorganized chaos, and all different types of people were coming to help. But not all was above board. Some volunteers took food and water, promising to take it to Floyd, but in their attempts had gotten scared and stashed the food and water in crevices, and it never made it to Floyd. This continued for days, with even the National Guard getting involved and the press spreading the news throughout the country. Tents were erected to feed and provide first aid to the rescuers, but as the weather temperature dropped, it slowed the efforts, and things took a turn for the worse. His rescue attempt lasted for 18 days. In the end, over 5,000 people had traveled to Sand Cave to help and to watch the rescue efforts. But on Monday, February 16th, 1925, at 1:15 p.m., when they finally broke through the Sand Cave passage, they found Floyd Collins dead. At this point, he had not eaten for a week. His cause of death was said to be exposure to the elements, exhaustion, and starvation. Due to his body condition, the coroner estimated he had only been dead for 24 hours. Even though they had broken through and had found him dead, they were still unable to release his leg. And they were also concerned because the shaft was still slumping at an alarming rate, so they left his body where it laid. It was months later before they made another attempt to remove his body, and this time they were successful in doing so. The family took Floyd's body and performed a formal burial closer to his family's home near Crystal Cave. He now rests in the Mammoth Cave Baptist Church Cemetery. May he rest in peace. short story. This story was told to us by the ranger. It's short, but I just wanted to share it with you. It is about a man who had come to tour the Mammoth Cave. Upon entering the cave, he realized how cold it was inside. The cave stays 44 to 47 degrees Fahrenheit all year round, you see. So he was permitted to go get his hat and was given a flashlight and directions to get out of the cave. He was supposed to make a left at a certain landmark, but he made the wrong left and got lost. He was trapped inside the cave for 40 hours. Rescuers searched for him and were both relieved and happy when they heard him singing at the top of his voice. When they finally reached the man, they asked why he was singing so loudly. His response was something to this effect: the silence was too much for him and he needed to drown it out. Now I can tell you, at one point, the ranger shut off all the lights and it got so dark in there that you could almost feel the darkness, and the silence was deafening. So his singing not only filled the silence, but also led his rescuers to him. Good going, sir. Now my fourth and final story. This story is about a brave and courageous man who was the most instrumental in forging the way through the Mammoth Cave, so that people like me can enjoy it today. His name was Stephen Bishop. Stephen Bishop was a slave, and though being in such a situation might have broken many, he was not. He was too intelligent for that, and he excelled where he was. Every year, the Mammoth Cave National Park Rangers lead an average of 500,000 visitors through the tight passageway, steep shafts, and vast chambers formed by gushing water millions of years ago. Yet without the slave labor of Stephen Bishop and others, most of this would not have been possible. In 1838, when Stephen was only 17 years old, he was bought and brought to the cave by a lawyer named Franklin Gorin. He was the new owner of the cave. His intent was to turn the cave into a tourist attraction. So he sent the young Stephen in to explore and make a trail so that it would be a viable place to attract paying tourists. Stephen was only given a lantern and ropes to make Franklin's dream come true, but Stephen was not fazed. He wandered the caverns, discovered tunnels, crawled through the tight spaces, crafted bridges to cross the bottomless pits, and sailed underground rivers. He was the one who actually found one of the many strange and fascinating wildlife that lived in the cave. It is the eyeless cavefish living in the cave's dark streams. The property was later sold to Dr. John Croghan in 1839, and Stephen was sold along with the property. But Bishop grew and expanded his knowledge of the cave as he ventured further and further into it. He continued to make many more discoveries during his exploration of Mammoth Cave, creating many miles of passageways through the trail. He was also the man to discover the Mammoth Dome and the ruins of Karnak. In 1842, during a visit to the Croghan Estate, Locust Grove in Louisville, Kentucky, Bishop drew a map from memory of the explored passageway of the cave. The map, which was credited to him, was published in the book Rambles in the Mammoth Cave in the year 1844 by a visitor. Bishop was loved and would be requested by visitors who came from all over the world to lead them in exploring the cave. It was said that Stephen was very intelligent, very perceptive, and had a prodigious memory. He remembered everybody that ever visited the cave, and because Stephen was who he was, he became almost as widely known as the cave itself. Bishop married a lady by the name of Charlotte, and they had one son whom they named Thomas. Thomas was born in 1843. But Dr. John Croghan had Stephen still enslaved and had even left in his will that Stephen should be set free 7 years after his death. So in 1855, Stephen became a free man, but continued to work at Mammoth Cave as a paid guide. Stephen Bishop and his family relocated to a 75-acre tract of land near the cave's property, but then, in the summer of 1857, Stephen died from unknown causes. Bishop was laid to rest in an unmarked grave just off the Heritage Trail near the park's visitors center in a small cemetery that Dr. Croghan had established for some of his deceased consumptive patients. And that's another story. 20 years later, a visitor to the area from Pittsburgh by the name of James R. Mellon had initially crafted a tombstone for a Union soldier. But when he saw that Stephen was not given a tombstone, he gave the one he had to Bishop. That is why his tombstone has that decorative military carving on it. Stephen was a self-educated man and was said to be, and I quote from an article by nps.gov, "He had a fine genius, a great fund of wit and humor, some little knowledge of Latin and Greek, and much knowledge of geology. But his great talent was his knowledge of man. His talents were of the first order. He was trustworthy and reliable. He was companionable. He was a hero, and he could be a clown. He knew a gentleman or a lady as if by instinct. He learned whatever he wished to learn without trouble or labor. And professors of geology spoke highly of his knowledge in that department of science." End of quote. Stephen Bishop's legacy continues at Mammoth Cave through the places he helped discover, the early adventurers of which he was a part, and his role in helping to expand the knowledge and reputation of Mammoth Cave. The stories of his life and discoveries are shared with hundreds of thousands of visitors who trace Bishop's footsteps each year inside Mammoth Cave. As you can imagine, this was very dangerous work, but he did it with such grace and style that he is still lauded for his efforts and is still remembered today. Thank you, Stephen Bishop.
Now, so how that works and how that happened is the cave is still being actively formed now at the very lowest depths. The lowest point in the cave is about 360 feet under the surface. Water, when it falls as rain, will go into surface cracks and sinkholes. And the cave itself is these open spaces within the hillsides and ridges that the water has been flowing through. There are very few surface bodies of water in this area. In fact, there's just one main surface body of water that you can always count on seeing, and that is the Green River. That cuts right through the heart of the park. All the water that forms the cave is going to go down to the very lowest level, and it will eventually exit the cave through what are called springs, and those springs then flow into the river on the surface. So if you want to do a couple of short hikes after the tour, you can go to the River Styx Spring. The Echo River Spring are the two most common springs where you can see if there has been enough rain in recent weeks, that water exiting from the lowest level of the cave into the river on the surface. Now, having said that, this is kind of a fun little quirk. If there's anybody who is on the river right now, boating, fishing, kayaking, enjoying a very frigid day on the water, in relation to sea level, they are several hundred feet below where we are now, even though we've got 150 feet of rotten dirt over our heads. Because the river is the lowest point in this area. The cave is just the open spaces in the hillsides and ridges that the water has already flowed through. So still water in the cave, just a couple hundred feet under us. Folks, if you're in the back, come on forward. I'm going to turn off the lights except for this one in my hand here. I'm going to ask if you have anything that is currently putting off light to turn that off.
Okay, that is that. Now that we have come to the end of the story of Mammoth Cave, I hope you enjoyed it. If so, give this video a like and share it with someone you think will find it interesting. Also, leave me a comment and let me know if you've ever visited the Mammoth Cave National Park and what you thought of it. If you want to come with us on our next trip, click the subscribe button and select all. Doing that guarantees you as one of my travel companions. Now, if you want to only listen to this story and all my other stories, I have that for you in my podcast of the same name. You will find the link in my description below. Don't forget to check out my books on Amazon, Kindle Velo, Google Play Books, Wattpad, and others. The links are down below as well. And if you want to support this channel and help me get to more places to find you lots more stories, I have a Patreon link below for that. Well, that is all for now, folks. Remember to love yourself and others, and do stay tuned for my next weekly video. I'll catch you on the next one. Love you. Bye.